Na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 ay 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 hey na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 Hananai, ai, rai, rai, ya, ya, na, nai, nai, ya, nai, ai, nai, ya, nai, ai, nai, ya, nai, na, 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 nai, na, 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 nai, na, na, nai, nai, ya, nai, ai, nai, ya, nai, ai, nai, ya, nai, ya, na, nai, nai, na, nai, nai. Shalom, shalom, wonderful friends. It is great to see you today. Really great to see you. An early Chag Sameach. Good wishes for a joyful Pesach holiday, whatever that looks like for you. And I'm really excited about session 4 with you today. Here from Chagiga, the tractate of Chagiga actually comes from Chag, like Chag Sameach, Chagiga. There's a Chagiga offering. It's a sacrifice that was brought for the Chag. And given today's topic and how esoteric and enigmatic it is, and rooted in spirituality and in mysticism, I want to dedicate it to my late friend David Lieberman, Yitzchak David Lieberman, who passed away just over a year ago, and would have particularly liked this session given his meditation and spirituality practice. So David Lieberman, this class is in your memory. So let me provide a little context, and then we're going to do a little poll question, and then we will study the text together. I'll offer a few questions, and we'll have some conversation. So, okay, this is a really rich and really deep passage here. This is happening, again, right after the Chorban of the second Beit HaMikdash. So this is the 2nd century of Roman-controlled Jerusalem, and over in Yavne. And we have 4 characters in our story. Hopefully you all received the text in advance now. If for some reason you still did not, feel free to email me and we'll make sure you get on that list. Again, we moved away from the Chavruta, the study partner model, into the model of sending it to you in advance. If you want to look at it in advance, again, you don't have to. And then spending more time in the text together. So this is the destruction of the temple and really the construction of contemporary, or not really contemporary, of Judaism as the religion we know it. Post-priest, post-temple, post-animal sacrifice, building off rabbinic Judaism ultimately. And we have 4 characters here. Next slide. We have 4 characters here. And what is the symbolism of 4? What is some of the relevance of the number 4 in Judaism? Anyone?
4 species, 4 cups.
Don't answer first, buddy.
I'm sorry.
Great. So just to start with that, going into the Pesach holiday, 4 is all over the place, right? There's 4 geulot, 4 redemptions, and that is why there are 4 cups of kiddush, and that is why there are 4 questions, and that's why there are 4 children, right, or 4 sons in the Seder. So 4 is all over Passover. 4 is a special number for me. I think in 4s because I have 4 children, and so I'm always thinking in 4s. Most people have 4 parents, right? Their parents and their in-laws. And then there's the 4 matriarchs, right? Of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And 4 is also a natural number. We have the 4 seasons of the year. We have the 4 directions, north, east, south, and west. It's a natural number. There's the four elements. Again, that's the side of nature. And then in Jewish law, there's four types of damage. Nezikin, in the laws of damage, you can do damage in four ways. And then in the mystical tradition, there's the four worlds, the four olamot in Kabbalah. So four has deep significance in nature, in the physical world, and in the metaphysical world. So these are the four characters. And again, I don't think it's accidental that it's four. And go to the next slide just to see another piece of artwork on these four. The ages will become relevant in a moment. Let's go to the next one. Yes, and forgive me, I put the wrong, thanks for pointing it out, Adam, the wrong page number. It's Chagiga 14b as opposed to 15a. And according to most, Rabbi Akiva will be the hero of the story, but not necessarily. Let's go on. Here's our four characters in our story. Let's unpack these four people for a moment, and we'll learn more about them later. So Rabbi Akiva, of course, is the most well-known. This is a reminder, someone who doesn't know the Aleph-Bet, doesn't know the Hebrew alphabet until age 40. His wife sacrifices a great deal. She comes from a wealthy family, but they cut her off financially because she wants to marry this Am Haaretz, this ignorant guy. And she works hard and he leaves her and goes and studies for years. And complex relationship, and becomes one of the greatest sages in the whole tradition. And these other three are his contemporaries. These are his study partners, or some of them at least. And what do you notice about the names Ben Azai and Ben Zoma? There's two things you might notice. Anyone?
They're defined as not by themselves, but from their lineage.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. So they're both of their first names are Shimon, but they're almost never or very rarely called Shimon ben Azai and Shimon ben Zoma. They're called son of Azai and son of Zoma. Anyone else notice something unique about their names? They're not called rabbi. They're not called Rav Shimon or Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma. Some people say this is about their scholarship, but most commonly it's explained two ways. Either that they didn't have smicha, they were not formally ordained, which was kind of a newer phenomenon. The other explanation is that it's their age, either that they weren't married yet, or that they were simply young. But it is not, I have not seen commentaries that understand it as a derogatory. This is not a put down to them. You might think not calling them their name was a put down, but actually a lot of the commentators view it as actually distinguishing them. It makes their name more unique because there's a lot of Shimons out there. This kind of distinguishes them even more. But we can open that up. And then Elisha ben Abuyah, a complicated character who we will dive into more, who becomes known as Acher as well. Okay, I think that is our first slide. Is that right? So what I want to do now is now give you a poll question. Offer you a little poll question here. Okay. When encountering ideas or experiences that feel overwhelming or beyond your understanding, what is the best response for you? Is it stay cautious and grounded, even if it means holding back? Is it push forward to explore as deeply as possible, even at risk? Or is it try to make sense of it in a way that fits what you already believe? Okay, give you a few seconds here to cast your vote. When you're encountering ideas or experiences that feel overwhelming or beyond your understanding, whatever that might look like for you, what is the best way to respond? Stay cautious and grounded, even if it means holding back. Push forward to explore as deeply as possible, even at risk. Or try to make sense of it in a way that fits what you already believe. Okay, very interesting. So 33% of you say stay cautious and grounded, even if it means holding back. Okay, that's going to become relevant to one of the characters in the story. 42% say push forward to explore as deeply as possible, even if it's at risk. You got to fight for truth, even if there's some cognitive or emotional risk involved. 25% say try to make sense of it in a way that might fit what you believe. All right, very, very interesting. So The story here is one of the most cryptic and philosophically rich stories in rabbinic literature. These four sages enter the Pardes, or the Pardes, a metaphor, perhaps, for deep metaphysical or mystical inquiry, and they all emerge with a radically different fate. Okay, my great colleague Carrie has put the text into the chat if you want to look at it that way, or it is now on the screen, and we will go through it, and in moments I will jump off the screen so we can discuss. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught. Four entered the orchard, right? In a literal sense, they're going into a place where things grow. But we know that the Pardes means many things other than just a physical orchard. This is generally understood to be a transcendental experience, if you will. They are going into a spiritual or an intellectual or a meditational reality, into a different world where secrets are revealed. And here's the four. We know the four. Ben Azai and Ben Zoma. Then they call him Acher, which means the other. He is the other. Also known as Elisha ben Abuyah. They don't call him rabbi here. And Rabbi Akiva. Okay. At this moment, let's say a little bit more about Ben Azai and Ben Zoma. Actually, we'll get to it in a moment. Okay, let's pause. Any comments so far on this Pardes and what they're going into? Questions or comments on where they're going? Okay, Rabbi Akiva, who, yes, is the most established among them, has the most students among them, most certainly. He says to them, when you arrive in these upper worlds and you reach pure marble stones, don't say water, water, although they appear to be water. Because it is stated, one who speaks falsehood should not be established before my eyes. Okay, this is a complicated view here. Anyone want to comment on this? Let me just offer one thing before that. He warns water, water about this pristine marble, perhaps captures something essential about spiritual life, that our eyes may deceive us and our souls rush to name what they have not yet understood. In some heightened spiritual experiences, even minor misinterpretations, Rabbi Akiva might be saying, can be catastrophic. Overconfidence hardens into theology. A single mistaken declaration can redirect an entire spiritual trajectory. What do you think is going on here with Rabbi Akiva? Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, so let's come back to him. Let's go to the next piece of the text. The Gemara proceeds to relate to what happens to each of them. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva is the one who warns them. I guess this kind of adds to his prominence, that he is the one who, is trying to be a guide to them on some level. Ben Azai hates v'met. He looks at the Shekhinah, he looks at the divine presence, and he dies. And with regard to him, the verse says, precious in the eyes of God is the death of God's pious ones. That's from Tehillim, from Psalms. Now, interesting there that his death is sanctified and not condemned, right? It's not condemned, Ben Azai, you extremist, you religious extremist, or you went too far. Precious in the eyes of God is the death of his pious ones. So Ben Azai is a remarkable character throughout the Talmud. And interesting enough, he's a little bit like a Catholic priest. He never marries. And they said a little bit like he's married to God, like a priest might say. He chooses not to marry. And when he's challenged, why don't you marry like the rest of us? Because that's not Judaism. We marry. He says, what should I do? My soul cleaves to Torah, right? I only have enough love, right? I think Jesus says something like this also. I only have enough love for one. And interesting enough, that's not God. His answer is Torah. He wants to be a student. He wants to fully immerse. He's also in a famous debate with Rabbi Akiva about what the greatest principle of the Torah is, and where Rabbi Akiva says, "Love your neighbor as yourself," and Ben Azai says, "Human dignity." So he is a big character. Actually, Adam and I were in an exchange a few days ago, and I shared a teaching from Ben Azai where he says that you should go after a minor mitzvah as you would a major one. I won't quote Adam there, although it wasn't private. It was just a private, personal exchange. But basically, this idea of the minor things in our lives matter as much as the major things. There's who we are should always be relevant. So he dies young. He dies very young. That's Ben Azai. This is the story of this great sage's death. Ben Zoma. Okay. Ben Zoma Hatzitz V'nifka. Hatzitz V'nifka. He looks at the divine presence, and he doesn't die like Ben Azai, but he is struck. He is injured, right? The word for a terrorist attack in modern Hebrew in Israel is pagua. There's a pagua. The bus was bombed. It's called a pagua. He's Hatzitz V'nifka. He is struck. He is he goes insane, is the way it's normally understood here. Now, it's worth noting, as we said earlier, worth noting that we said there's two different Talmuds, right? The Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. And in those two different Talmuds, they switched the order. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it is Ben Zoma who dies, and Ben Azai who is struck. But the main read is according to the Babylonian Talmud here that says that this is what happened. And it says about him, have you found honey? Eat as much as sufficient for you, lest you become full from it and vomit it. Right? So here is kind of a critique that, a child overeats like a glutton until they become sick and throw up from it. And somebody with wisdom is not going to do that. Now, what do we know about Ben Zoma? Okay, well, let me say two things. Firstly, he might be the reason why, for those of us who have a Passover Seder tomorrow night, why we have a Passover Seder. Why? Because he's in the Haggadah, in a story that perhaps people who skip over parts skip over because it feels insignificant. It says something like, you should tell the story all the days of your life. And Ben Zoma says, it says all of the days of your life, because it means the days and the nights. Okay, so who cares, the days and the nights? What he has established is most mitzvot are only relevant to the day, not at night, or many mitzvot, I should say. And what he's saying is that the Seder can and should be at night because the mitzvah to tell the story also is relevant at night. And so the reason for a Seder, we might say, is because of Ben Zoma. Where he argues that we should have this ritual of a night telling of the story. Okay, but more famously than this is in perhaps my favorite Pirkei Avot, or at least top 10, is Pirkei Avot 4:1, where he says, "Who is wise?" Someone remind us of the answer. Unmute yourself. Who is wise?
Who is satisfied with his lot in life?
No. That is who is rich. That is who is rich.
Sorry.
But thank you, Lauren, thank you. Yes, who is rich? Sameach b'chelko, Lauren is right. that's one of his four. Going back to fours, by the way, one who is happy with what they have, right? Okay, yes, Alan, who is wise?
Who is wise? A person that knows they can learn from everybody.
Good. Wise is someone who can learn from everyone. Who is mighty? Who is the hero? Anyone remember that one? Who is the mighty hero? Hakovesh et Yitzro, one who controls themselves, one who has inner restraint. And who is honored? One who honors others. So it's a remarkable teaching of Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma says that wisdom is not about some degree or what you know. It's about how you relate to others. Being rich is not about what you have. It's about how you relate to what you have. Being powerful or heroic or strong is not about your physical strength, but about your moral restraint. And being honored is not about having your name on something. Nothing wrong with that. But it's about how you honor others and bring dignity to other people's lives. That's where your honor is ultimately. So Ben Zoma is just a remarkable figure. Yes, Sarah.
So I'm confused if indeed he said that our strength comes from controlling ourselves, and yet we read this thing and he's supposed to be a glutton for God or whatever. I'm confused.
Great. I love it. So there's two possibilities here, or there's obviously more, but the first two that come to mind is that he learns this after the Pardes story. He goes too far, as we all have in our lives, and then he learns the wisdom of, oh my gosh, restraint is what we need in our lives.
So this madness that he supposedly gets as his pagua is just momentary? It does not last?
Great. That's a great point. So we might read this is he is eternally condemned to insanity, or as Sarah suggests, the possibility it is a temporary mental illness, or state of being. I'm going to offer an alternative reading later, but the other possibility is that his teaching in Pirkei Avot precedes this, and he simply failed to live by his own wisdom. He understood, we all have wisdom that we profess, that we struggle to live by. I certainly have a lot of that. And perhaps he understood that that restraint was what was needed, and he lost himself. In fact, sometimes it's easier to lose ourselves in social settings. Maybe in isolation, he could restrain himself. But once he's all fired up with his chevra, he's with his group, he feels like, you know what, let's let go a little bit. It's our 50th college reunion. You know what? Let's let go of it. It's girls' night out. It's guys' night out. Let's go have a good time, right? Now, I don't know what you do when you have a good time on girls' night out or guys' night out, but they want to have a mystical experience. Yes, Stan.
This seems real close to me to the story of Icarus from Greek mythology, who didn't know his limitations and got too close to the sun. So it seems to correspond, and that actually predates, I believe, this. And the other thing that came to mind was when Aaron's sons both got wiped out for not adhering to the rule. Those
Great.
Came to my mind.
Great. I love that. I love both of those points because you're right that the drawing off those Greek stories, something is floating through the world at this time period around this theme. I love that. And yeah, I think when it comes to spirituality, I think we've lost this fervency in our time period where people can even imagine going too far. I go too far. Like I struggle to even connect spiritually. But then on your other point, Nadav and Avihu, who bring this for an offering and die. And many people read that text as saying, Aaron's sons are actually themselves holy offerings. As we read here with Ben Azai, they're almost accepted as offerings to God. That it's not that they're religious extremists who are punished, but their bodies are kind of raised up and accepted. But there we see Ben Azai is celebrated. Ben Zoma is a little bit critiqued. So yes, great points, Stan. Okay, let's go back to our text. We'll go to our third figure here. The figure of Acher. So Acher is a student of Rabbi Meir. Next week we will go into Rabbi Meir and his wife, Bruria, the great sage Bruria, and one of the stories about them. But I'm sorry, it's the opposite. Acher is the teacher of Rabbi Meir, not the student. Acher is the teacher of the great sage Rabbi Meir. And what happens to him? Kitzetz bin netiot. He chops down trees. But not just that, he gets them at the root. If you cut down a tree, or if you cut down some things, it can grow back. But if you uproot the roots of it, you're making it impossible for something to regrow. Acher is the quintessential heretic in the Talmud. He's the first recorded atheist in Jewish tradition. And he is a complicated figure. If you never read Milton Steinberg's As a Driven Leaf, you might want to return to it because it's about this. If you haven't read it in over 20 years, you might want to return to it because it's one of the great works of Talmudic historical fiction. So we'll come back to Acher. Actually, we don't need to come back. Anybody want to comment on Acher? Without getting into the later parts of the story before we move to Rabbi Akiva? Let's go off the screen here, Carrie. Yes, Adam.
I don't have a comment. I just have I don't have a question, or maybe I do. I don't know. But first of all, can you say something about, so the first two people, right, Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, glimpsed, right? Glimpsed right? How did, it didn't say saw or commune. Right. It was just a glimpse, right? Like it's like in this incredibly brief moment. And then when we get to Acher, right, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say what the relationship really is, right, with this encounter, right? It simply jumps right to, right, this apostasy of some sort, right? I was just wondering if you could comment a little bit on that. Like, first of all, what is the Hebrew word that we're translating to glimpse, right? As opposed to and is it as brief as it sounds in English, right?
Great. I have looked at this text so many times and I've never thought about that. That's a whole new read here on the experience that the whole verb is not even offered. The word here for the first two is hatzitz, and I really don't know enough about that word. And I wonder if anyone else here does, to really offer any insight on it other than knowing that it means a quick glance. Seats. But I'm going to think more about that. And then the fact that with Acher, it doesn't even say that. It goes right to, it doesn't even tell us what his encounter or his relationship to the spiritual experiences. It moves immediately to something that appears to be destructive. So I'm curious, Adam, do you make something of that? Like, what do you make of that?
Well, I think that in terms of I think that ultimately where we are, right, is on incredibly dangerous ground, right? Mm-hmm. That we've entered into a place that for all of them, right? A glimpse doesn't sound like a glutton, right? Like just this momentary, right, encounter for Ben Zoma, right, turns into something major, right? And somehow it also created within Acher the the need to remove, right, that which something, right, to somehow upend, right, his relationship with the Godhead. And that no matter how we look at it, it's got to be a place that can, on the one hand, if we're trying to commune with the Godhead, it can be something special and enlightening, but it also can be very dangerous and in fact cause us to lose our way.
Yes, that's fascinating. Yeah, so if we unpack that a little further, Adam makes the great point that glancing or a glimpse doesn't feel like overindulgence. But if we move this from the category of a transcendental spiritual encounter into the question of cognitive limits, it's been suggested before that once you've entered into the epistemological era of or stage of skepticism, it is hard to go back to absolutism. Once you've entered certain intellectual ways of being, it is hard to go back. And so if Ben Azai has a total over-identification with truth, he kind of loses himself in just a glimpse. Or if Ben Zoma experiences fragmentation, he sees too many paradoxes without integration. Or Acher has just a moment of misinterpretation, false conclusions from just partial truths, whatever it might be. Something has changed. Now, as Adam points out, it doesn't even say that Acher sees anything. He's just uprooting the shoots. Now, again, removing the roots. Another way to understand that could be that which should remain unified has now been separated. It's not just that it's irreparable. You've done irreparable harm by removing the roots. It's that you've cut something off from its source. In a sense. Okay, I see a number of other hands have gone up. Let's go. I think the order was Ken, and then Lauren, and then David, and then we'll go back to the text. Ken.
There really seems to be a complete separation here between the first two and the second two, because only the first two have a glimpse of the divine presence. Neither Acher nor Akiva there's no mention of any connection to the divine presence while they're in the Pardes. So that's another difference. And the other is I'm somewhat confused as to why you say chopping down saplings is uprooting them. There's no, in my translation here, it doesn't say anything about uprooting. And the key to me seems to be that they're saplings, they're young, that they're not yet fully formed, and he is preventing new things from growing. And he's preventing new learning, perhaps. Obviously, this is all metaphorical. I assume that Ben Azai did not actually die at this moment in his life. That the madness also is a metaphorical madness, and not an actual madness. And that all these comments are metaphorical rather than actual. That we're thinking of, but there does seem to be a real break between how they act while they're in the Pardes, and there's a separation between the two groups, and yet all of them have a completely separate reaction to being there, which I think has nothing to do with them being there, but has to do with each one of their individual lives, their actual learnings, the way they interact. So that's my.
If you go to actually it's easy to see, because if you go to the very end, the far left of the first line, you will see that the Hebrew word is hates. Ben Zoma hates. He glimpses. Now go to right below that. Acher kitzetz. You'll see the root is inside of it. Hates is glimpses, tzadi, Ketsates is he uproots or he cuts. Kates means an end to something, right? Which is where, going back to Ken's point, I was getting the uprooted. It's not just that he cuts it down. You could read it as that, but he ends it in a way that seems to be like uprooting. And you see that seats is inside the word. The Talmud is almost hinting that in the same act of uprooting the tree, whatever that is, he's also seeing something. He's seeing in the same. Remember Rashbi and the fireballs? In seeing, he destroys. It's almost like he is seeing and uprooting in the same act. So that's the first thing I was going to say based on Ken's point. How many of us act different if we were together with all of our siblings? Maybe you don't have siblings. Maybe you don't talk to your siblings. Maybe you don't see them often. But many people act differently in certain group dynamics. That's not a rare thing. And just like the 4 children in the Haggadah, it might be innate to who they are, the wise one, the wicked one, blah, 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 or it might be in the dynamic. So Ken was talking about the 4 of them and kind of their life, but it might also be that there's 4 experiences that are almost inevitable in a group dynamic, and it kind of falls out differently based upon them being together as opposed to it being essential to who they are. Okay, so much more to say about what Ken said, but we got to get back to the text soon. So Lauren, let's go to you and then David, and then we'll jump back in.
Okay, 2 things. One, I looked up Hitzitz, and the Shorish is Tzadi Yod Tzadi, and translated as Lahistakel, like just to look very, very
great,
short period of time, but it's actually kind of to peep. So it doesn't sound like it's something you really should be doing. The other thing I want to say is I studied this story once when I was learning Zohar with someone, and I'm not one for Zohar, but it gives me the idea that the whole idea of going to Pardes from the beginning is not a good idea unless you're as grounded as Rabbi Akiva, right? They just, all 3 out of the 4 come out with a bad outcome. So maybe this is teaching us that we really shouldn't be going beyond, like, trying to be otherworldly. We really should be grounded in the world and not like in our heads. Almost like the story that we learned before with staying in the cave and coming out, not being ready for human beings. So I think it's a similar thing.
Great. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. So there could be a problem with going to the Pardes in general, or the problem could be in looking at the forbidden. This is something that's hard for us as contemporary, modern people to understand. We want the full truth. We want full access to everything. The idea of limits can be hard, but the idea that there's something not to look at. There's something that is off limits. It's kind of like when God says to Moshe, you can't see my face. You can only see my back. But imagine Moshe then says, well, I'm just going to make a little peek. And he peeks around and he kind of goes blind or something. There's a sense of thank you for looking up the Histakel Ma'at, that almost peeking, like I'm kind of thinking of Trump without his glasses on, looking at the solar eclipse or the lunar eclipse, whatever it was. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I just want to look a little bit without the glasses. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that point. And so how do we understand where we can go and where we shouldn't go? And it's another way to think about it in a relational realm. There's some conversations we don't want to have with certain people we care about, right? Because we know it's not going to go well. It's just too painful, or it's just too polarizing. And part of wisdom is learning how to be in relationship with people and avoiding some conversations that don't have to be had, right? Not everybody has to have every conversation, right? Because you've learned that there are limits to what we can discuss, what we can look at, what we can do together. Just like there are limits of how of intimacy. This is about divine intimacy. There's limits of how we relate to other people's bodies, right? We don't touch other people's bodies. We don't look at other people's bodies unless we're invited, or it's consensual, or it's marital, or however we understand this. There are intimacy limits. Okay, David, to you, and then we'll move on.
Pardes is paradise. And one psychological theory says that to realize that we're living, where is paradise? We're here, the earth, this Goldilocks moment where we have oxygen, we have everything we need, and we shouldn't trash it. We should keep it holy. And the Jewish dictum, don't worry about afterlife. Let's try to do tikkun olam. Let's make this world great. So to me, we're living in paradise. And it's interesting that the rabbis go to paradise. Mm-hmm. And then this whole thing about the poll question, do you pull back with new knowledge? Do you jump in? Do you try to make sense of it? And I always go back to the beginning of Genesis, and it says, you shall not eat of the tree of knowledge or life. What is that all about? Because Judaism is all about learning and studying Talmud and science, and and so why, when these rabbis are going to see God and they die, they go insane, and then the third guy, he cuts down all the roots of knowledge. I don't understand if we're supposed to search for knowledge or not search for knowledge. It's just confusing.
Great. Yes, it is very, very confusing. And those are great points and questions. And it's worth us thinking about what the Pardes is for another moment before we move on. Because one read of the Pardes is that these are the four interpretive tools for text, right? The P or the Pei in Pardes is pshat. The resh is remez, is kind of the hints. The dalid is drush or drasha, like interpretations, and the samech is sod or secrets. And there's four levels to interpret text, just like most of Christian interpretations is a literal tradition. The Jewish tradition only understood literal reads of text as one of four ways to read text. And did they go too far into sod, into the secret realm, right, beyond the literal read? The other possibility, as Sarah points out in the side, that as some have suggested, is it being a psychedelic experience, right? Are these rabbis engaged in some other type of experience? Then Maimonides differs from Nachmanides. Maimonides thinks this is purely intellectual. This is not about spirituality or transcendence. This is about bad truth. It's about bad thinking. It's about getting things intellectually wrong. It's not about mystical ascent. He demystifies the story. Whereas Nachmanides, the Ramban, reads this as an actual mystical encounter. The risks are ontological, not just psychological. But in Chassidut, the Baal Shem Tov, as a third perspective, reads this about the self. This is about a journey into the self, right? Again, Maimonides, search for truth. Nachmanides and the mystics, encounter with God. But Baal Shem Tov and the Hasidic thinkers, this is a journey into the inner self. Some people can't journey into the inner self. Some people, like Rabbi Akiva, as we'll see in a moment, will come out in peace if they do that inner journey. Some people, if you go really deep into your trauma, or you go really deep into your past, or into these things, some really painful things are going to be encountered. And some people might be prepared for that, and some people might not be prepared for that. And so, is this an encounter with God? Is this a search for truth? Is this an interpretation of text and reality? Is this a journey into selfhood and into trauma, into identity, into memory? Those are great questions, and I think we can read it in all these different ways. Yes, okay, back to over to Adam, and then we'll jump back in the text.
So I did, just when we go back to the very beginning, when it says the four entered the orchard, right? They entered there. And we start with a warning, right? But from Rabbi Akiva. And he says, when you get to the upper realms, right, and you reach marble stones, right, and you say water, like what you see may not be what the reality is. You're all teachers, right? Like I'm teaching the teachers, right? And so so you may actually see something that doesn't actually exist. You may actually see something that is false. and your teachers. And so then you may disseminate false knowledge, right? You're in a danger zone, right? And so when you get to these places of transcendence, you may completely misinterpret what's exactly there. And I think when we go on, which we haven't, but when it says Rabbi Akiva came out safely, that he's able to sort of balance this.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I love that. And yeah. And what happens when we get really confused, or we put things in our head or our heart we don't want there? I'm thinking of parenting right now. Maybe you have children, maybe you have grandchildren. Maybe you think about what they should have access to. Maybe you, like me, saw things too early. Like, I went into a movie when I was too young, and I did not sleep for like 2 years after this movie of alien abductions and things like that. Maybe you had a trauma all too young. You saw things or experienced things that you could not get out of your head and heart. And part of this is like, not just what do we expose ourselves to, and but kids, and this whole debate around meta right now, and this court ruling of like addictions and social media, of like are we going to legislate and protect our youth from addictions and from anxieties and from seeing things they shouldn't see? And for ourselves also, once we have a mistruth in our head, it is really hard to get it out. If nobody is protecting us from just rampant lies and mistruths being spread that lead to hate and misunderstandings, it can be really hard to walk those back and correct those. Okay, let's go back to the text. As we already mentioned, but we should just say it in the text, Rabbi Akiva yatsa b'shalom. He leaves in peace. So similar to Acher, it doesn't say Hatzitz, although again, I pointed out that that's kind of hidden in the case, into the word of Kitzitz for Acher. It just says he goes out in peace. He goes out in peace. Okay. So he, from the main read of the story, Rabbi Akiva is the hero of the story. He has because shalom is one of the greatest attributes that one could live with, to live with spiritual equanimity, to live with peace, where one is not living in a state of constant agitation, but in a sense of wholeness, of shleimut, a sense of fostering peace in the world. Rabbi Akiva somehow achieves this not only spiritually, but this moral attribute in some sense. Okay, let's finish the story. So right after this, well, actually not right after this. There's a little break that I don't go into. There's because there's more to the story, a little more to the story. But I jump forward because I think it's fascinating as it relates to Acher. The sages taught there was once an incident involving Acher, who was riding on a horse on Shabbat, and Rabbi Meir was walking behind him to learn Torah from him. And I wanted to do this before next week, because we're going to dive into Rabbi Meir next week. Rabbi Meir says, I don't care if you are now deemed to be some atheist or heretic. I don't care that you've left the tradition. I love you. You're my teacher, right? And I still want to learn from you, right? Going back to Ben Zoma, learning from everyone. Rabbi Meir says, you're doing something that is prohibited on Shabbat, as I understand the tradition. We don't ride horses on Shabbat. We don't go this way. But Rabbi Meir is walking behind him because he wants to learn from him still. I find this I almost want to cry when I think of that. It's so beautiful to me that he loves him and respects him and is a pluralist and sees him as his teacher. And yet, let's understand Acher too. Acher says to him, Meir. By the way, I named my firstborn son Meir. His name is Meir Lev Cook. Meir means illuminator. Illuminator, because it's someone who shares light. So Meir, turn back, because I've estimated and measured according to the steps of my horse that the Shabbat boundary ends here. It's called the Techum. Traditionally, there's a Techum that you don't travel certain distances on Shabbat in the Talmud. And so Acher doesn't care about these boundaries for himself anymore, but he cares about the boundary for his student. Still, he's counting the steps Not because he doesn't care. He says, what is this narishkeit? I don't care about this craziness, these Jewish laws around how far to go on Shabbat. Like, I am out of there. I am done with that Jewish law. Like, I am out of this stuff, but I'm not out of it for you. Mayor, I love you. And so I'm counting my steps because that's your boundary and I respect your boundary, even though it's not boundary. I don't keep kosher, but you do. I don't care about Shabbat, but you do. And I find that just as emotionally overwhelming that this guy who views this as silly, maybe, or is not at all relevant to his own moral and spiritual tradition anymore, he loves his student, so he cares about his boundary. Rabbi Meir then says to him, you too return. So maybe it's not a total pluralistic. Maybe he doesn't embrace Elisha's boundary as being valid, but he still loves him. So he says, come back. We want you with us. This is pre-modern, so there's no pluralism doesn't really make sense. The idea of multiple truths and the like, that's a very modern idea. But the idea of like, okay, I still respect you, I still love you, I want you to be a part of my community. He says to him, but have I not already told you? I heard behind the curtain, return, rebellious children, do teshuvah. That is relevant to everyone except for Acher. Acher heard a voice that said, everyone can repent, everyone can return except him. So he says, I'm sorry, my student Meir, I love you, but I've been told I can't return. I'm out. And he walks on. What do you make of this encounter? What do you think is going on here? Yes, Lauren, it's tragic. What do you think about this conversation that happens here between friends, between parent and between teacher and student? Yes, Lauren.
It really is tragic. Acher has all this knowledge, so he's truly an apikoros, right? He's somebody who has the knowledge but turns away. But somehow he believes that there's no tshuva from him for himself, and maybe that's because he went to Pardes and it made him a little bit crazy, and something happened there where he felt he overstepped a boundary and he can't return. So the two stories may be connected, but it's incredibly tragic. And I mean, he obviously cares enough that he cares that Rabbi Meir doesn't transgress Shabbat. So he's not like completely divorced from it. He's just decided for himself, but he doesn't reject it. It's very, very sad.
Great. So thank you. So I want to momentarily. Oh, and I skipped our discussion questions earlier. I'm sorry. Actually, it would technically come now, but we just finished the text. So I'll share that as leaving space for folks who want to talk after. So I want to protect the honor of Elisha ben Abuyah for a moment, because yes, he's often written off as this heretic. He went too far, and he left the tradition, but he doesn't go off to be a robber or a thief or this horrible guy. He doesn't go off because he's followed just to become some glutton that just wants to pursue his own desires, right? He's struggling with truth. It's a noble pursuit of him trying to figure out who he is and what he stands for and what he believes. And to go back to the Talmudic tradition about what causes this for him, the understanding is that he witnesses a great angel called Metatron. And Metatron, in the celestial realm, he perceives what appears to be two supreme forces, right? He sees good and evil as two separate forces in the celestial realm. And what he's struggling with is theodicy. How could there be a good God and there's evil in the world? Right? How are people suffering? He sees suffering in the world and he struggles to make sense of that theologically, right? To me, that's a noble struggle Elisha struggles with. So he's written off as Acher in a derogatory way. This other guy, he's out of the tradition, right? But here at VBM, a pluralistic orientation, we want Acher inside our circle. We want him to be embraced and loved and said, you know what? You're an atheist. We love you. You belong here. And you know what? You don't want to live by Jewish law. We want you here. And so, Yes, there's a tragic read of this guy who now has no community. He's lost his relationships. He's lost his truth. He's but there's this other read of this of Elisha being an important albeit tragic figure. So yes, anyone else want to weigh in on that encounter? Yes, David. And then
I just think it's so beautiful that the Talmud were including the gladiators, we're including the atheists. I mean, my God, they include everybody. We talk, we schmooze, whatever. I've been reading about Spinoza. I went to Amsterdam last October. I mean, he is the father in some ways of modern Reform Judaism, secular thinking, and they threw him out. But all of these characters are part of our tradition. It's just so beautiful that 2,000 years ago they realized that.
Yes, and by the way, I have been arguing for a lifting of the ban. I've written letters to the rabbis of Amsterdam that they should lift the ban that was never lifted on Spinoza. It's falling on deaf ears. They want to maintain the ban, but Spinoza. I mean, this is some of the academics say it was hubris. But others say this is a heroic person who, when he was kicked out of the Jewish community, he didn't become Christian. He had nowhere to go. Same with Acher. Acher had nowhere to go. Ultimately, this is not a small thing. Yes, Adam.
Yeah, so you mentioned as a driven leaf earlier, and in that telling, right, that it seems like Acher, he gets to the point where he can't reconcile what's actually happening in life, right, with what he's been taught, right? That to follow kashrut in the way he's been asked, and the law, and is to step away from what he sees as his moral compass, right? And so much of what I think that our teachings ask us to do is to apply a moral and ethical framework, right, to the life that we end up leading, and that ultimately he can't keep the vessels, right? He can't keep the vessels shatter for him in his own emotional and spiritual world. And what he's saying to Meir is, I no longer am able to keep this contained, but you are. Right? Like you are within this place that I can know, because I've lost the boundaries and the that which bounds me to, or binds me, right, to this tradition. Like, I don't see it as someone who no longer cares about it. I see it as somebody who no longer can keep the balance there, right? But understands that in his student, that hasn't happened to him.
Yes.
Right? I think it's something that's really tragic. I don't think that he is frivolous about his ideas about Judaism, but simply that he wants to, he can no longer keep this within himself.
Yes, I love that. And I think also, building off Adam's point here, is it would be really hard to imagine attaining the wisdom to say to somebody, I'm not the right person to advise you, right? Like, I am in a different place from where you're at, and I can't be of the help of what you need. And maybe something we can relate to is, maybe there was a break in your idealism at some point. Maybe you were an idealist, and then your idealism shattered. You became cynical or skeptical, but you love someone who's still idealistic, but you don't want to tear down their idealism and say, "Oh, it's all broken. This pathway is going to lead to nothing." So you point them to someone else who is an idealist, who can guide them and support them. And so too, I think Adam's point is really great around his inability to integrate all these different values and truths means he's in a different place from where Meir's at, and he honors that, and that's a really deep understanding. Janie, make the last comment, and then I'm going to leave, and I'll leave the room open for 10 minutes for those who want to stay.
I'm really way over my head, but it struck me that probably Acher, when he was uprooting all the saplings, what he was doing was getting rid of all of the so-called truths in Judaism. And so he also had to get rid of the rites and the rituals that remind Jews of those truths. For example, Pesach. We celebrate what happened in Passover, so we don't forget that. But what if you want to get rid of the idea of Passover and get to a basic truth? Then you can't practice those rituals that are reminders of what had happened. So I think he's trying to get down to the very bottom of, if I am going to find truth, I have to get rid of all the rituals that are reminding me of truths that I believed in before.
Yes. Okay. So interesting, Janie. And if we think about that paradigm of how much do we have to restart when we have to rebuild? I think that's a really deep psychological question of how much do I have to uproot of my previous way of being in the world, my previous way of thinking about life, if I want to progress, if I want to grow. Do I just need to tweak a little something, or do I really have to get to the core and uproot something fundamental of who I am? If you've ever had a radically transformational experience in your life, where you had to rebuild your life from a very low place, you were down in the dust. That question has emerged for us of what do I need to uproot in my life, in my identity, in my memory, in my values, in my theology to actually get to where I want. And again, that's a place where Elisha might be a hero for us. So thank you. I love learning from you all. And if anyone has to leave now, you should feel free to do that. If anyone wants to stay and chat with the group as I leave for another 10 minutes, feel free to do that. Carrie will keep it open. And I've put some questions in the chat. Carrie's put some of my questions in the chat if you want to lean on those at all, or you can just have your own comments. But with that, I wish everyone who observes a Chag Sameach, a beautiful Pesach holiday. And I look forward to seeing you and Rabbi Meir and Bruria next week. Have a great day.